Penny, do you want to fire away first then?
Penny Allen from Melbourne. I think most of us are more acutely aware of the sudden visual loss that occurs when you remove silicone oil. Do you believe that that is related to the length of time that the patient has had the silicone oil in situ?
Yeah, so the literature, some of that suggests that the longer the oil's in, the more likely you are to get this. It, in some ways, makes sense if you think that whatever chemical or cellular process is happening, the longer the oil's in for, the more that will happen. Now, although we may not understand the mechanism behind it, if you slowly weaken the retina and then you get to a point where you're going to stress the eye by removing the oil. So yes, length of oil tamponade is definitely being identified as a risk, Penny, for...
In your Bosu study, Johnny, do you recall what the median time was? Because you had 2%, wasn't it? 2% of oil used.
So all of the
Bosu study, what was the median time for the oil?
Yeah, all of the... I can't remember the exact figure. All of the cases were reported in our study were all at the time of oil removal. So there wasn't one clinician in the UK who came to us saying, this is the insidious type of oil loss, it's the sudden one. The factors that really stood out for us in that study were if you were young, if you were male, then you were more likely to experience this condition, and if you had a macular on retinal detachment. Now, you might make a good argument that if you're MAC on, well, you're going to see it much more easily because you start with really good vision and then you drop to hand movements. It's pretty obvious. If you were 660 and you dropped a bit, it's a little bit more difficult to identify. So, so they're the factors that came out. I'd like to say we identified others, but COVID, unfortunately, landed right in the middle of everything and made life a little bit more difficult. So yes, is the answer, Penny. I think I would be, you know, the longer you're leaving the oil in, the more at risk you could possibly be. Same question. Okay.
David.
David, sorry.
Hi, thanks. David Steele has recently produced an analysis, I think it's still in review, but showing that heavy oil seems to have a much better visual prognosis in retinal detachment than light oil. Can you tell us why that is?
Yeah, I know. We talked about this morning briefly in the MDR lecture. David mentioned the results.
Thank you.
It's good stuff, heavy oil. Don't be scared of it.
Yeah, I'm just going to go no with that one. Not having seen the data, no, I don't know anything about the data. So, but I mean,
Quite convincing.
Yeah, I believe so.
And it wasn't just inferior detachments, was it, from his data?
They did some fairly clever statistical things
Yeah.
that I don't fully understand, but to match it with eyes treated with light silicone oil,
Yeah.
found that there was a significantly better anatomical and, more importantly, functional outcomes.
So, and what we touched on this morning was with heavy oil, I think most clinicians are more likely to take it out sooner because of its inflammatory effects. So, therefore, shorter time it's in the eye, possibly.
I think it's on the label as well, so it's on label to take it out after 8 weeks.
Yeah.
So the time of
Yeah, but that doesn't happen. So, I mean, we did a survey across the UK, and the average time that the heavy oil was left in the real world was many, many months. In a public service, it's not. We don't always get the oil out in the exact time frame that you might wish.
Yes.
Hello. I had 2 questions. Very nice talks from everyone. Firstly, you talked about the chemical composition of gases that we use. It is actually the same as perfluorocarbons, so the gases are perfluorocarbons. My first question is there any reports of gas-related sudden visual loss? Because if it's the same type of compounds as perfluorocarbons or heavy liquids, does gas cause any sudden visual loss? And my second question was, a lot of the theme of everyone's talks is impurities. Impurities seems to be one of the main factors that leads to toxicity and things like that. Part of the manufacturing process with these oils or heavy liquids, of course, it's a very expensive process. Do you feel that countries not outside of Europe, so let's say developing countries which can't afford expensive oils or expensive perfluorocarbon liquids, do you find in those countries there's higher rates because maybe their manufacturing or their purification process is not as thorough as maybe in European companies? I know that's two very long questions, but please, thank you.
So in answer to the first question, or Farah? No, please, you go.
Okay. Okay, for the first question, yes, we use the gas. We need to distinguish between gases because C2F6 and C3F8, yes, they are perfluorocarbons, but we need also to consider that among the big category of the PFAS, our compound, PFCl, and these two gases, fluorinated gases, are defined by these authorities itself like chemical compounds with limited activity. So it's already a kind of subgroup. Yes, there are unexplained vision loss described with the gases. Actually, there is a recent review from Passor that didn't find so much difference comparing gas and silicon oil, but there are several case series describing a much lower risk when you use gas. It's also true that if you go to analyze the literature, most of the evidence comes from retrospective studies, sometimes with different definition of unexplained vision loss, and you need also to think about what do you mean for unexplained visual loss, because we speak about visual loss, but it's not always visual loss, but is a decreased vision compared with the baseline level, that it's very different. And also another findings that can make confusion is that some of these case series include some cases that then recovered after the surgery. So that had visual loss immediately after the surgery and then they recovered. And another hypothesis is that this can be related with some phototoxicity instead during the removal itself of silicone oil. And that's why these maybe happen almost immediately after the silicone oil removal. Because there are some kind of reflection on the oil bubble becoming smaller and these causing some phototoxicity to the fovea. And that's for the first question. For the second question...
Well, why don't we give Helgi the manufacturing one?
Oh, yeah.
Sure. So great question. Thanks. Let's consider the world is globalized, and when you go to the fair over there, you see a lot of global companies. They are active everywhere worldwide, and many countries worldwide have standards as well, and you need to go through approval. And in these countries, they also check for example, for FDA approvals, so US approval, or for the CE mark approval. And so generally, I don't know where you're coming from, but I would say even in third world countries, when there is a market behind it, you will find good quality products.
Thank you.
2 more minutes left, guys. So.
And one short question,
if
possible? Yes. Just to be sure, you're asking us to trust the companies that make these oils and gases. Is there a possibility that we have been testing it wrong regarding its safety? Because we have been testing in retinal pigment epithelium cells, not in neuroretinal cells, if I'm correct?
Well, I would say once you go talk about testing and correct testing, there's one thing which is very important. It's that these tests are kind of validated. You have to make sure that these tests really work. That you close your eyes, do this test, and it's 100%. And that having said, you can develop every test you want. If it's validated, it works, then it's fine. So there is no right or wrong to this question. Yeah.
So it also occurs, so the difference between chemical testing and biological testing, and you'll have noticed in Mario Antonio's criteria, one of the things that clinicians should, in our opinion, know is what is the cytotoxicity level of that product.
Yeah, it's also true that you are right, because all the alert that we had about the PFO produced by Alaocta, it was certified as safe, but they choose the wrong test. Because the point is that we have regulations, but we don't have regulation for the specific compound. So if you look at that ISO, that is for in vitro cytotoxicity test, that is a different one, the ISO gives you some standard and allows you to choose between 3 different tests. based on the physical property of our compound, of the PFCl in these cases. The test that they chose, that was an extract test, was not suitable for that compound because it couldn't detect the toxicity that can be done with the direct contact cytotoxicity test. So that's true, and it's very complex. That's why we are trying to find some criteria, because once you ask for the test that has been done, then they need to declare it. Otherwise, they can show you just the CE marking and say, okay, yeah, we certified the test. And they are they are not lying, but it's just that the procedure can be wrong while choosing the test.
Right, I think that's the end of the session. I hope you all enjoy that. Thanks very much for attending.
Right, thank you guys.
See you next year.